Commander Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the impossible sight before her. 37 alien vessels hung in the void like predatory sharks, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with menacing patterns. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest dreadnought, their organic curves suggesting they'd been grown rather than built. The Zephyrian Collective had arrived 3 days ago with an ultimatum that had sent shockwaves through every human colony from Earth to the Outer Rim. Surrender unconditionally or face complete annihilation. The message had been delivered in perfect human languages, downloaded directly from intercepted communications across human space. The aliens had been watching, learning, preparing. Admiral Marcus Reeves materialized beside Chun through the ship's holographic communication system, his weathered face grim with determination. "Sarah, I need you to understand what we're facing here. Our intelligence suggests the Zephyrians have conquered 47 different species over the past millennium. They don't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They absorb entire civilizations into their collective consciousness." Chun turned from the viewport, her dark eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "What about the other species? Did any of them fight back?" "According to the data we've intercepted, most surrendered after witnessing a demonstration of Zephyrian power. The few that resisted were eliminated within weeks." Reeves paused, his expression hardening. "But they've never encountered humans before." The bridge around Chun buzzed with activity as her crew prepared for what many believed would be humanity's final battle. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out sensor readings while Ensign Kim frantically worked to boost their shield harmonics. Chief Engineer Murphy's voice crackled through the comm system, reporting that the experimental weapons were online and ready. "Admiral," Chun said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of their situation, "what's the official response from Earth Command?" Reeves was silent for a long moment before answering. "The Colonial Council voted 6 hours ago. President Hassan delivered the message to the Zephyrian fleet leader personally." He paused, and Chun could see the ghost of a smile cross his features. "Humanity chooses Va." The decision had not been easy. Earth's population had swelled to 12 billion, with another 8 billion scattered across the colonies. Surrender might mean survival for some, but it would also mean the end of human independence, human culture, human identity. The debate had raged for days in the halls of power, but in the end, the choice was unanimous. Chun felt a chill run down her spine, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. From the caves of their ancient past to the stars themselves, humans had survived by refusing to yield, by fighting when fighting seemed hopeless. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with tension. "The Zephyrian flagship is moving. They're positioning themselves directly above New Sydney." Through the viewport, Chun could see the massive alien vessel, easily 2 kilometers long, descending toward the planet's atmosphere. New Sydney was home to 4 million colonists, including her own sister and nephew. The Zephyrians were making their intentions clear. "All ships, battle stations," Chun commanded, her voice carrying across the fleet communication channels. "This is it, people. They want to see what humans are made of. Let's show them." The human fleet was pitifully small compared to the alien armada. 12 dreadnoughts, 36 cruisers, and over 100 smaller vessels represented the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Against any human enemy, it would have been overwhelming. Against the Zephyrians, it looked like a collection of toys. But Admiral Reeves had spent the last 2 years preparing for this moment. Human engineers had studied every piece of alien technology they could find, looking for weaknesses, searching for advantages. The result was a series of innovations that pushed human technology beyond anything previously imagined. "Murphy," Chin called to her chief engineer, "status on the quantum disruptors?" "Green across the board, Commander. The containment fields are holding steady. We've got enough power for maybe 6 shots before we need to recharge." The quantum disruptors were humanity's secret weapon, based on theoretical physics that human scientists had been developing since the first contact with alien technology decades ago. Unlike conventional weapons that relied on kinetic or energy-based damage, the disruptors attacked the quantum coherence that held matter together at the subatomic level. "Sir," Ensign Kim reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship." "Put it through," Chin ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that challenged human comprehension. The Zephyrian commander was humanoid in basic shape, but clearly evolved from some form of aquatic life. Its skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, and multiple eyes arranged in a complex array allowed it to perceive far more of the electromagnetic spectrum than human vision could process. When it spoke, the translation came through in perfect, emotionless English. I am Fleetmind Zelker of the Zephyrian Collective. You have chosen to resist integration. This is unexpected. Your species shows intelligence patterns we have not encountered before. Chun stepped forward, knowing that billions of humans across the colonies were watching this exchange. This is Commander Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. We speak for humanity, and our answer remains the same. We will not surrender. Your resistance is admirable, but futile. We have conquered species with technology far superior to yours. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our bioships. Your defensive capabilities are insufficient to prevent our neural integration protocols. Why do you choose extinction over evolution? Because, Chin replied, her voice carrying the weight of human history, some things are worth fighting for. Freedom, independence, the right to determine our own destiny. These aren't primitive concepts. They're what make us human. Zelker's patterns shifted in what might have been confusion or amusement. We have observed your species for several of your years. You fight among yourselves constantly. You destroy your own environments. You seem incapable of unity except when facing external threats. Why do you value such chaos? Chun felt a surge of something she couldn't quite name: pride, defiance, and something deeper. You call it chaos. We call it humanity. Yes, we fight. Yes, we struggle. But we also dream, create, love, and hope. We've turned a violent species into explorers of the stars. We've learned to work together without losing what makes us individuals. You offer us the peace of the grave. We choose the chaos of life. The aliens' patterns shifted more rapidly now. Then, you choose extinction. Your courage is noted and will be preserved in our collective memory. We will make your end swift. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Chun looked around at her crew, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination on every face. They all knew what was coming. "All right, people," she said, her voice steady and clear. "The die is cast. We've got one chance to prove that human ingenuity can overcome superior numbers. Weapons officer, prepare to target their command ship. Navigation, plot us an intercept course. Communications, send the signal to all fleet units." The signal was simple, 3 words that would echo through human history. "Cry havoc, advance." It was the code phrase that would initiate humanity's desperate gambit. Across the fleet, fusion reactors were pushed beyond their safety limits. Experimental weapons systems that existed only in prototype began charging. Every human ship began accelerating toward the alien fleet at velocities that stressed their structural integrity. Chun watched the tactical display as the two forces moved toward each other. The Zephyrian ships maintained their formation, confident in their superiority. They had seen this pattern 47 times before, a desperate charge by an inferior force, followed by quick annihilation. But they had never seen humans fight. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, "Zephyrian ships are powering weapons. Energy signatures are off the scale." "Acknowledged. All ships, implement scatter pattern Delta. Don't give them easy targets." The human fleet split apart like a school of fish avoiding a predator, each ship following a different trajectory toward the alien formation. It was a tactic born from studying natural predator-prey relationships, adapted for 3-dimensional space combat. The first exchange of fire lit up the void between the fleets. Zephyrian bioweapons launched what appeared to be living projectiles that moved with impossible agility, tracking human ships with organic precision. The human vessels responded with everything they had. Railguns firing depleted uranium slugs at significant fractions of light speed, plasma torpedoes that burned as hot as stellar cores, and conventional missiles carrying fusion warheads. Chun gripped her command chair as the Defiance shook under the impact of a bioweapon that struck their port shield generator. The organic projectile seemed to eat through their energy barriers, dissolving the protective field and beginning to work on the ship's armor. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Reported damage control. The organism is attempting to penetrate our secondary hull." "Murphy, can you contain it?" "Working on it, Commander. The thing doesn't respond to conventional countermeasures, but I'm trying something new." Through the chaos of battle, Chun watched as the first human ship died. The UES Yorktown, one of their heavy cruisers, was overwhelmed by 3 Zephyrian bioweapons simultaneously. The alien organisms didn't just destroy the ship, they consumed it, breaking down its molecular structure and absorbing the materials into themselves. But humanity's desperate charge was having an unexpected effect. The Zephyrian formation, designed to fight conventional enemies who maintained safe distances while exchanging fire, was being disrupted by human ships willing to close to point-blank range. Rodriguez, distance to the nearest enemy ship? 2,000 kilometers, and closing fast, Commander. Perfect. Weapons officer, prepare quantum disruptors for point-blank engagement. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations to come. The UES Defiance, flying a trajectory that should have resulted in its complete destruction, somehow slipped through the Zephyrian defensive fire and emerged directly alongside their nearest bioship. At a range of less than 500 meters, Chun gave the order that changed everything. Fire. The quantum disruptor beam struck the alien vessel's organic hull, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, reality itself appeared to unravel around the impact point. The bioship's living tissue began to break apart at the quantum level, its coherent molecular structure dissolving into component atoms. The Zephyrian vessel died, with what could only be described as a scream, a psychic emanation that was felt rather than heard, rippling through space with enough force to disrupt nearby electronic systems. It was the first time in over a millennium that a Zephyrian bioship had been destroyed in combat. Across the human fleet, cheers erupted on every ship. They had drawn first blood against an enemy that had seemed invincible. More importantly, they had proven that the Zephyrians could be hurt. But the celebration was short-lived. The death of their ship had triggered a change in Zephyrian tactics. Instead of maintaining their formation, the alien vessels began moving with new purpose, their bioluminescent patterns shifting to deep red frequencies that spoke of rage. Fleetmind Zelker's voice echoed across all communication channels. Impossible. Your weapons should not be able to breach our bioarmor. What manner of weapon is this? Chun keyed her response for fleet-wide broadcast. It's called human ingenuity. We've had a long time to study your technology, and humans are very good at finding ways to kill things that seem unkillable. This changes nothing. 1 ship destroyed against 36 remaining. You have merely prolonged your extinction. Maybe, Chun admitted, watching as another human vessel fell to Zephyrian fire. But we're going to make you pay for every inch. And you know what the funny thing is? Even if you win here, you lose. Because now you know that humans can hurt you. And there are billions more of us out there, all learning how to build these weapons. For the first time in the conversation, Zelker's patterns showed something that might have been uncertainty. Your species is remarkably aggressive. Most civilizations seek survival above all else. Survival's important. Chun agreed as she ordered another attack run. But some things are more important than survival. Like making sure that bullies understand they can't push people around without consequences. The battle raged for 6 more hours, and when it was over, humanity had lost 9 ships and over 40,000 lives. But they had also destroyed 4 Zephyrian vessels and damaged 7 others. Most importantly, they had sent a message that would ripple across the galaxy. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, and they would make their enemies pay in blood for every victory. The cosmos had spent eons knowing the peace of inevitable conquest. Now it would learn the chaos of human defiance. As the surviving human ships limped away from the battlefield, Chun looked out at the stars and smiled. The Zephyrians thought they were ending a species. Instead, they had awakened something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The age of human warfare had begun, and the universe would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of New Sydney, the galaxy was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. The news of humanity's resistance had spread like wildfire through the underground networks that connected the various subjugated species under Zephyrian rule. For the first time in centuries, there was talk of rebellion. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Firebase Alpha, humanity's first deep space military installation built specifically for guerrilla warfare. Hidden in an asteroid field on the edge of the Kepler sector, the base was invisible to conventional sensors and powered by geothermal energy tapped from the asteroid's molten core. It represented everything humans had learned about fighting an enemy with superior technology and numbers. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Jackson called out from the communications station. We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chun. It's marked urgent. Vasquez nodded, noting how her former academy classmate had been promoted after the heroics at New Sydney. The chain of command had been restructured after the initial battle, with experienced officers taking charge of the new guerrilla warfare doctrine that Earth Command had developed. Put it through on the secure channel. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, her expression grim but determined. Elena, we've got a situation developing in the Proxima system. Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are planning a massive retaliation strike. They're assembling a fleet 3 times larger than what we faced at New Sydney. Vasquez felt her stomach drop. Proxima Centauri was home to nearly 2 million colonists, including some of humanity's most important research facilities. What's the target? All of it. Our sources inside the collective suggest they're planning to make an example of the entire system. Complete sterilization of all human presence. Then, broadcast the footage across known space. How long do we have? 72 hours before their fleet reaches the outer system. Elena, this isn't a request for reinforcement. This is a notification. Earth Command has classified Proxima as a total loss. We're evacuating what civilians we can, but we won't be able to save everyone. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Vasquez looked around the command center at her staff, seeing the same shocked expressions on every face. The evacuation protocols had been developed as a worst-case scenario, but no one had expected to use them so soon. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Chen nodded, though her expression suggested she already knew what was coming. We can't just abandon 2 million people. There has to be something we can do. Elena, they're sending 87 ships. We have maybe 20 vessels in that entire sector, and most of them are frigates and light cruisers. Even with the quantum disruptors, the math doesn't work. But Vasquez was already thinking, her mind racing through possibilities that conventional military doctrine would have dismissed as impossible. What if we don't fight them directly? What if we make them come to us on our terms? Chen's expression shifted slightly. Explain. The Proxima system has 3 gas giants. Each one has extensive mining operations in their asteroid belts. If we position our ships correctly, use the gravitational fields, and debris as cover, we might be able to force them into a series of smaller engagements instead of one massive battle. That's still suicide, Elena. You'd be asking our people to hold position against impossible odds. Maybe, but here's what I've learned studying the Zephyrian battle recordings. They're not used to enemies who fight dirty. Every species they've conquered has followed conventional military tactics. But humans? We've been fighting unconventional wars for our entire history. Chen was quiet for a long moment, and Vasquez could see her weighing the options. Finally, she spoke. What do you need? Everything you can spare. Ships, personnel, and, most importantly, every quantum disruptor we've manufactured. Plus some equipment that probably violates every safety regulation Earth Command has ever written. Such as antimatter mines. Lots of them. The concept was simple in theory, terrifyingly dangerous in practice. Antimatter was the most powerful explosive humans had ever created, but it was also incredibly unstable. Storing it required magnetic containment fields that consumed enormous amounts of energy. Using it as a weapon meant accepting that a single malfunction could vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. But, as Vasquez explained her plan, Chen began to see the twisted logic behind it. The Zephyrians would expect human forces to either flee or make a desperate last stand. They wouldn't expect humans to turn an entire star system into a trap. You're talking about mining the entire approach route. That's thousands of antimatter charges. Exactly. We place them along the likely vectors from the edge of the system to Proxima Prime. Then we wait. When their fleet enters the system, we detonate the mines in sequence, herding them toward prepared kill zones where our ships are waiting with quantum disruptors. Elena, the margin for error on this plan is essentially 0. If anything goes wrong, you'll be sitting at the center of the largest explosion in human history. Admiral, with respect, if we don't try this, those 2 million people are going to die anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting and maybe take some of them with us. Chen was quiet for several minutes, and Vasquez could see her running calculations in her head. Finally, she nodded. I'll authorize it. But, Elena, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about the Proxima system anymore. We've been monitoring communications across the galaxy. Other species are watching what we do here. If we can prove that the Zephyrians can be defeated, even at great cost, it might inspire others to resist. The next 72 hours were a blur of frantic activity. Ships arrived from across human space, carrying volunteers who understood they were probably flying to their deaths. The quantum disruptor production facilities worked around the clock, shipping their deadly cargo to Proxima. Most critically, antimatter production was ramped up to levels that made safety engineers wake up in cold sweats. Vasquez found herself in command of the largest desperate operation in human history. 28 ships, including 6 of the new heavy destroyers built specifically around quantum disruptor technology. More importantly, she commanded nearly 3,000 volunteers who had answered the call to defend Proxima. Chief Petty Officer Williams, her weapons specialist, summed up the mood perfectly. "Captain, I've been in the service for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. These people aren't just following orders, they're believers. They think we can actually win this thing." "Can we?" Vasquez asked honestly. Williams was quiet for a moment, checking the tactical display that showed the positions of their ships throughout the system. "Probably not. But we're going to make those alien bastards remember the name of every human who dies here." The Zephyrian fleet arrived exactly on schedule, a massive formation that emerged from hyperspace with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. 87 bioships, each one larger and more advanced than anything humanity had previously encountered. Their formation was a work of art, geometrically precise and tactically flawless. For the first 6 hours, everything proceeded exactly as Fleetmind Zelker had planned. The formation advanced through the outer system, sensors scanning for human ships while weapons systems powered up in preparation for the systematic destruction of every human installation. Then the first antimatter mine detonated. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, a brief nova that outshone Proxima Centauri itself for several seconds. The Zephyrian ship that triggered it simply ceased to exist, along with 2 nearby vessels that were caught in the blast radius. Vasquez watched from her command ship, hidden in the shadow of Proxima's largest gas giant. "That's 3 down, 84 to go. All units begin Phase 2. The second phase involves something no military force had ever attempted, using antimatter explosions to hurt an enemy fleet. The mines have been placed with careful attention to gravitational fields and orbital mechanics. Each detonation would push the Zephyrian formation toward specific vectors, channeling them into prepared kill zones. It worked with terrifying effectiveness. The Zephyrians, faced with invisible mines that could vaporize their ships without warning, began taking evasive action that followed exactly the paths Vasquez had predicted. Their tight formation broke apart as individual commanders tried to find safe passages through the minefield. "They're splitting up," reported Lieutenant Shun, no relation to the Admiral. 7 ships heading for the primary mining station, 12 breaking off toward the orbital platforms. "Perfect." Jackson signaled the hunter groups. "It's time to see how they handle multiple simultaneous attacks." The hunter groups were small formations of human ships, typically 3 vessels working together. Each group was equipped with quantum disruptors and had orders to engage Zephyrian ships at close range, then immediately retreat before enemy reinforcements could arrive. It was the kind of hit-and-run warfare that humans had perfected fighting each other for thousands of years. The first engagement took place near Proxima's second moon. 3 human destroyers, led by Commander Sarah Kim, intercepted a group of Zephyrian ships that were investigating the orbital mining platform. The aliens expected another desperate charge like they had seen at New Sydney. Instead, they got something much more sophisticated. The human ships approached in a triangular formation, using the moon's gravity well to mask their approach. At the last moment, they separated, attacking the Zephyrian formation from 3 different angles simultaneously. The quantum disruptors fired in perfect coordination, focusing their beam weapons on single targets, while using the moon's mass to break line of sight with the rest of the enemy fleet. 2 Zephyrian bioships died in the first 30 seconds of combat. The third was badly damaged before the human ships disappeared behind the moon, using its gravity to slingshot toward a different vector. Commander Kim's voice came through on the tactical channel, barely containing her excitement. "Scratch 2 more bogeys." The coordinated targeting works. Their bio-armor can't handle focused quantum disruption from multiple angles. Across the Proxima system, similar engagements were taking place. Human forces appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished before the Zephyrians could respond effectively. It was exactly the opposite of everything the aliens had learned to expect from space combat. Fleetmind Zelker's confusion was evident in his communications to the rest of his fleet. These tactics are incomprehensible. They sacrifice tactical advantage for temporary gains. Their formations have no defensive capability. Why do they fight in such disorder? The answer came from Captain Vasquez herself, broadcasting on all frequencies. Because disorder is what we're good at. You've spent 1,000 years fighting species that think like you do. But humans learned warfare by fighting each other, and humans never fight fair. To prove her point, she ordered the activation of Phase 3, the gravitational trap. The gravitational trap was the most audacious part of the entire plan. Human engineers had spent the previous weeks attaching massive rocket engines to several large asteroids in the system. These asteroids had been fitted with their own antimatter charges and set on carefully calculated trajectories. When Vasquez gave the order, the rockets fired simultaneously, sending the asteroids hurtling toward the main Zephyrian formation at velocities that would have been impossible to achieve naturally. The aliens detected the incoming objects and began evasive maneuvers, but they didn't understand what they were really facing until it was too late. The asteroids weren't meant to hit the Zephyrian ships directly. Instead, they were positioned to create a complex gravitational field that would funnel the enemy fleet into a specific region of space, a region that human forces had spent 3 days filling with antimatter mines. The resulting explosion was visible from Earth itself. 47 antimatter charges detonated in sequence over the course of 30 seconds, creating a chain reaction of destruction that consumed nearly half of the Zephyrian fleet. The energy release was so enormous that it temporarily disrupted the system's magnetic field, causing aurora effects visible from the surface of every planet in the system. When the light faded, 36 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed. The survivors found themselves scattered throughout the system, their formation completely broken, their tactical advantage neutralized. But the cost to humanity had been enormous. 14 ships had been lost in the fighting, either destroyed by enemy fire or caught in the edges of their own antimatter explosions. Over 2,000 human lives have been sacrificed to achieve this victory. Vasquez surveyed the aftermath from her damaged command ship, looking at tactical displays that showed a transformed battlefield. The mighty Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors, many of them damaged and separated from their support vessels. All units, she broadcast, commence final phase. Hunt them down. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships, working in small groups, stalked the surviving Zephyrian vessels through the asteroid belts and gas giant rings of the Proxima system. They used every advantage their smaller ships could provide: superior maneuverability, better knowledge of local space, and tactics that confused and frustrated their enemies. The final Zephyrian ship was destroyed 18 hours later, run down by a formation of human frigates after a running battle through Proxima's outer asteroid belt. When it died, its psychic scream joined the chorus of its fallen comrades, creating a sound that would haunt the dreams of every human survivor. The Battle of Proxima was over. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had not only defeated a vastly superior Zephyrian fleet, but they had annihilated it completely. Not a single enemy ship escaped to carry word of the defeat back to the collective. But even as they celebrated their victory, Vasquez and her surviving crews understood that they had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. They had proven that the Zephyrians could be defeated, but they had also demonstrated that humans were willing to fight with a level of violence and cunning that shocked even their allies. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave humans a reason to get creative about warfare. And for the first time in a millennium, the Zephyrian collective was afraid. The Galactic Council had not convened in emergency session for over 200 years. The ancient amphitheater on the neutral world of Concordia Prime hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 43 different species gathered to discuss the unthinkable, the possibility that the Zephyrian collective could be defeated. Ambassador Kethvar of the Altarian Republic stood at the central podium, his crystalline features reflecting the bioluminescent patterns that served as his species' primary form of communication. As the senior member of the council, he had the responsibility of addressing the crisis that threatened to upend millennia of established galactic order. Fellow beings, he began, his translated voice carrying the formal cadence that diplomatic protocol demanded, we gather in unprecedented circumstances. For the first time since the formation of this council, we must acknowledge that the balance of power which has maintained galactic stability may be fundamentally changing. In the observer galleries, beings from dozens of species watched in tense silence. The Thraxian hive mind maintained their characteristic stillness, while the Vortani delegation's feathers rippled with barely contained agitation. Even a normally serene ethereal collective seemed disturbed by recent events. 12 days ago, Kethvar continued, the human species achieved what our finest military strategists believed impossible. They not only defeated a major Zephyrian fleet, but completely annihilated it. More disturbing still, they accomplished this victory through tactics that our computer models cannot adequately simulate. The amphitheater filled with the various sounds that different species made to express shock and disbelief. The Zephyrians themselves had not sent a representative to this session, marking the first time in Council history that they had refused to participate in emergency proceedings. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, humanity's newly appointed ambassador to the Galactic Council, sat in the small section reserved for emerging species, those civilizations that had achieved faster-than-light travel, but were not yet considered full members of galactic society. At 34, she was the youngest ambassador in Council history, and her presence here represented humanity's sudden elevation from curiosity to significant threat. Ambassador Harper, Kethvar called out, his crystalline face turning toward the human section. The Council would benefit from hearing humanity's perspective on these recent events. Harper stood slowly, aware that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this moment. She was a xenobiologist by training, not a diplomat, but Earth Command had chosen her specifically because she understood alien psychology better than any other human alive. Honored Council members, she began, speaking in the universal translation matrix that allowed real-time communication between species. Humanity appreciates the opportunity to address this assembly. However, I feel there may be some misconceptions about our recent actions that need clarification. A ripple of interest moved through the amphitheater. In the 2 centuries since the Council's formation, no species had ever addressed them with anything but the most deferential respect. We did not seek conflict with the Zephyrian collective. They arrived in our space with an ultimatum: surrender unconditionally or face annihilation. They gave us no option for negotiation, no opportunity for peaceful coexistence. When faced with extinction or resistance, we chose resistance. The Thraxian delegate, speaking through their hive mind interface, interjected, query, human tactics demonstrate unprecedented aggression levels. Standard combat doctrine analysis suggests 78% probability of civilizational extinction when employing such strategies. Explanation requested. Harper had been briefed on this question by Admiral Chen herself. The answer is simple. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire evolutionary history. We've developed tactics specifically designed to overcome superior numbers and technology because throughout our past, survival often depended on defeating enemies who seemed invincible. Impossible, declared the Vortani delegation leader, her feathers bristling with indignation. No species can maintain technological advancement while engaging in constant warfare. Aggressive civilizations destroy themselves before achieving spaceflight. With respect, Harper replied, humans prove that assumption incorrect. We've fought over 50 major wars just in the last 1,000 years of our recorded history, including 2 global conflicts that involved our entire planet. Each time, we emerged stronger, more innovative, and more united than before. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. The idea of a species that used warfare as a tool for advancement rather than destruction challenged every model of civilization development that galactic science had established. Kethvar's patterns shifted to deep blues and purples, indicating profound concern. Ambassador Harper, are you suggesting that humanity views warfare as beneficial? Not beneficial necessarily, but inevitable. Humans accept that conflict is a natural part of existence. We've learned to channel our aggressive tendencies toward external threats while maintaining internal cooperation. When the Zephyrians demanded our surrender, they became an external threat. Everything that followed was simply human nature. What Harper didn't mention was the full extent of what human nature had accomplished in the weeks following the Battle of Proxima. Intelligence reports had begun filtering in from across Zephyrian space, describing something that military historians would later call the human effect. On 17 different worlds, subjugated species had risen in revolt against their Zephyrian overseers. The rebellions had been inspired by intercepted transmissions of human battles, but they were being fought with a ferocity that surprised even human observers. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were remembering what it meant to fight for freedom. The Calarian resistance movement, for example, had managed to destroy 3 Zephyrian processing facilities using improvised explosives based on human designs shared through underground networks. The Nexari had begun coordinating system-wide strikes that were crippling Zephyrian resource extraction operations. Most significantly, the Protean Collective, a species that had been absorbed into the Zephyrian consciousness over 4 centuries ago, had begun reasserting individual identity, breaking free from the neural networks that had enslaved them. But it was on the world of Terminus 7 that the most significant development was occurring. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a human xenopsychologist, had been working with a group of former Zephyrian subjects to understand how the alien collective consciousness functioned. What she had discovered was revolutionary. The Zephyrian mind link isn't as unbreakable as we thought, she explained to Admiral Chun via secure transmission from the hidden research facility. It relies on constant reinforcement through bioelectrical fields generated by their ships and ground installations. When those fields are disrupted, individual consciousness can reassert itself. The implications were staggering. Every species the Zephyrians had absorbed was potentially recoverable if their control networks could be severed. But more importantly for human strategic planning, the collective consciousness that made the Zephyrians so militarily effective also represented their greatest vulnerability. Admiral Tanaka continued, I think we can turn their greatest strength against them. But it's going to require a level of coordination between human forces that we've never attempted before. Back on Concordia Prime, Ambassador Harper was fielding increasingly hostile questions from council members who were beginning to understand the true implications of human involvement in galactic affairs. Your species has introduced chaos into a stable system, accused the ethereal representative, its translucent form shimmering with agitation. The Zephyrians maintained order across hundreds of systems. Now, there are revolts breaking out everywhere. Order through oppression isn't order, Harper replied firmly. It's slavery with better marketing. If other species are choosing to fight for their freedom, that's their decision to make. But the consequences affect us all, Kethvar interjected. Economic disruption, refugee crises, the potential collapse of established trade networks. The Zephyrians may respond to these rebellions with unprecedented brutality. Harper's expression hardened. Then, maybe it's time for the Galactic Council to do something more than just maintain the status quo. These species you're worried about disrupting have been suffering under Zephyrian rule for centuries. Where was the Council's concern for them? The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Harper could see that her words had struck home. The uncomfortable truth was that the Galactic Council had been content to ignore Zephyrian expansion as long as it didn't threaten their own territories. They had maintained their stable system by sacrificing countless other species to an expansionist empire. What do you propose? Asked the Kethmoran delegate, breaking the silence that had settled over the assembly. Alliance, Harper said simply. Not just with humanity, but with every species that wants to be free. Share technology, coordinate military strategies, provide mutual support against Zephyrian retaliation. Impossible, declared the Vortani delegate. Our species have different physiologies, different technologies, different strategic doctrines. We cannot simply merge our military capabilities. Humans thought the same thing once, Harper replied. We had dozens of different nations with incompatible military systems. But when faced with a common enemy, we learned to work together. It's not easy, but it's possible. She gestured to the holographic display that materialized beside the podium, showing tactical information from the Battle of Proxima. Human forces won that battle by using our ships in ways their designers never intended. We combined mining equipment with military hardware, used civilian navigation systems for military targeting, and coordinated attacks across multiple species' technological standards. The display showed how human engineers had modified Alterian sensor arrays for use on human ships, how Thraxian computational systems had been integrated with human weapons platforms, and how Kethmoran gravity manipulation technology had been crucial to the gravitational trap that destroyed the Zephyrian fleet. You've been stealing our technology, accused the Altarian subdelegate. We've been adapting technology that was freely shared through normal diplomatic channels, Harper corrected. But more importantly, we've been proving that different species can work together more effectively than anyone believed possible. It was at that moment that the emergency alert began sounding throughout the amphitheater. The massive displays around the chamber flickered to life, showing real-time intelligence data from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Collective was mobilizing on an unprecedented scale. Kethvar's crystalline features reflected the urgent patterns that indicated extreme alarm. The intelligence networks are reporting massive fleet movements throughout Zephyrian space. They appear to be consolidating forces for a major operation. How major? Harper asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. Based on these readings, every ship they have. The entire collective fleet is being assembled for what appears to be a coordinated strike against all active rebellion sites simultaneously. The implications were clear to everyone in the chamber. The Zephyrians weren't planning surgical strikes to suppress individual uprisings. They were preparing to make an example that would terrorize the galaxy into submission. Entire species would be exterminated to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Harper looked around the amphitheater at the representatives of dozens of species, seeing fear, uncertainty, and, in some cases, resignation. Many of them were already calculating how they could distance themselves from the human-inspired rebellions to avoid Zephyrian retaliation. "Council members," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "you have a choice to make. You could try to return to the status quo, pretend that the galaxy can go back to the way it was before humans arrived. Or you can accept that the status quo was built on the suffering of billions of beings who deserve better." She paused, looking directly at Kethvar. The Zephyrians aren't just coming for the rebels. They're coming for anyone who might inspire rebellion. That includes species who have remained neutral, but possess technology or resources that could threaten their control. How long do you think your own neutrality will protect you? The question sparked heated debates among the various delegations as they realized the truth of Harper's words. The Zephyrians had tolerated the Galactic Council only as long as it served their interests. Now that their absolute dominance was being challenged, there was no guarantee they would continue to respect the Council's independence. "What exactly are you proposing?" Kethvar asked finally. "A new kind of alliance. Not just mutual defense, but active cooperation to break Zephyrian control throughout the galaxy. Pool our resources, share our technologies, coordinate our efforts. Fight together or fall separately." Even if we agreed to such an alliance, the ethereal representative interjected, the military mathematics are still impossible. The Zephyrians command thousands of ships and control hundreds of worlds. The combined forces of the rebelling species cannot match their strength. Harper smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several of the alien delegates shift uncomfortably. "That's assuming we fight them on their terms, using conventional tactics and strategies. But humans have never been very good at following conventional wisdom." She gestured again, and the holographic display changed to show the current disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy. Unlike the massive fleets that other species favored, human ships were scattered in small groups across dozens of systems, apparently random in their placement. For the past month, human strike teams have been infiltrating Zephyrian-controlled space. Not to engage in major battles, but to study their infrastructure, map their communication networks, and identify their critical vulnerabilities. The display zoomed in on several key systems, showing detailed intelligence about Zephyrian command centers, neural network hubs, and logistical support facilities. The amount of information was staggering, representing a level of intelligence gathering that traditional methods would have taken years to accomplish. "Human special forces excel at operating behind enemy lines," Harper explained. "We've been preparing for a different kind of war, one that targets the foundations of Zephyrian power rather than just their military forces." Kethvar's patterns shifted to rapid gold and silver pulses, indicating intense mental calculation. "You're proposing a coordinated campaign of sabotage and psychological warfare, among other things. But most importantly, we're proposing hope. Every species in this chamber has technologies and capabilities that could be crucial to breaking Zephyrian control. The question is whether you're willing to use them." The debate that followed would later be recognized as one of the most important moments in galactic history. For 6 hours, representatives argued about the risks and potential rewards of joining humanity's war against the Zephyrians. Some species withdrew from the discussion entirely, unwilling to risk Zephyrian retaliation. Others demanded guarantees that humanity could not possibly provide. But gradually a coalition began to form. The Altarian Republic agreed to share their advanced sensor technology. The Thraxian hive mind offered their unparalleled computational resources. The Keth Moran contributed their gravity manipulation systems. One by one, species that had never cooperated before began to see the possibility of united resistance. When a final vote was called, 27 species had committed to joining what would become known as the Liberation Alliance. It was a smaller number than Harper had hoped for, but it represented more military and technological resources than any single organization in galactic history. As the session concluded and the various delegations began the complex process of coordinating their efforts, Harper received a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen's face appeared on her personal communicator, her expression grim with urgency. "Elizabeth, we've got a problem. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something moving toward Earth. Something big." "How big?" 300 ships, minimum. The Zephyrians aren't just targeting the rebellion sites. They're coming straight for the source. Harper felt a chill run down her spine. The alliance was still forming, their coordination protocols were untested, and now humanity's homeworld was under direct threat. Everything they had worked for could be destroyed before their new coalition had a chance to prove itself. But as she looked around at the alien delegates who were already beginning to coordinate their joint response, she realized something important. For the first time since the crisis began, humans weren't fighting alone. The galaxy had finally chosen a side. The question now was whether they could work together effectively enough to save not just Earth, but the dream of galactic freedom that humanity had inspired. The universe was about to discover what happened when species that had never trusted each other were forced to fight as one. The Earth Defense Fleet hung in formation around Luna, humanity's ancient moon now bristling with defensive installations that had been under construction for months. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, humanity's first true war flagship, built from the ground up using technologies shared by their new allies in the Liberation Alliance. The ship itself was a testament to interspecies cooperation under pressure. Altarian sensor arrays provided unprecedented detection range. Thraxian computational systems processed tactical data at speeds that human minds couldn't comprehend. Keth Moran gravity drives allowed maneuvers that defied traditional physics. And at the heart of it all, human engineering had found ways to make technologies from different species work together in ways their original designers never imagined. "Admiral," reported Commander Martinez from his sensor station, "long-range scanners are picking up the Zephyrian fleet. 312 ships in a perfect geometric formation. Estimated arrival in 14 hours. Chen nodded grimly. The largest human fleet ever assembled consisted of 96 ships, supported by 43 vessels from Alliance species. Even with their technological advantages, the numbers were daunting. But then again, humans had never been impressed by mere numbers. "Communications, open a channel to all Alliance vessels. Let's make sure everyone understands the plan." The main screen split into multiple views showing the commanders of the various allied ships. The diversity was striking. Altarian Captain Veltar with his crystalline features, Thraxian Collective Node 7', represented by a shifting pattern of bioluminescent signals, Kethran Fleet Singer Rum, whose massive bulk required a specially designed command chair, and dozens of others representing species that had never fought together before. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored collective entities," Chun began, "in 12 hours, we face the largest military force the galaxy has ever seen. The Zephyrians are bringing everything they have because they understand what we represent. Proof that their empire can be challenged." She paused, looking at each face on the screen. "I won't lie to you. The conventional military analysis suggests we should be annihilated in the first hour of combat. But conventional military analysis has never accounted for what happens when desperate species refuse to accept defeat." Captain Veltar's patterns shifted to skeptical orange frequencies. "Admiral Chun, our combined technological advantages are significant, but the mathematical disparity remains overwhelming. Are you certain this strategy will be effective?" "Certain? No. But confident? Absolutely. Shun gestured, and the tactical display showed the current position of human forces throughout the Sol system. The Zephyrians expect us to meet them in open space with everything we have. Classic defensive doctrine says we should position our fleet between Earth and the incoming threat. That's not what we're doing. Observe Thraxinode 7 Prime. Its translated voice carrying an undertone of curiosity. Exactly. Instead, we're going to let them come to us. The Sol system has been humanity's home for millions of years. We know every asteroid, every gravitational anomaly, every piece of debris. More importantly, we've spent the last 6 months turning all of that into weapons. The display zoomed in on various locations throughout the system, revealing the full scope of humanity's preparations. Hidden weapon platforms were disguised as routine space installations. Asteroid mines have been converted into massive rail gun emplacements. Even the orbital habitats around Earth have been fitted with defensive systems that could double as offensive weapons. But the most audacious part of the plan involved Jupiter itself. Fleet Singer Rum, Chin addressed the Kethmoran commander. Your people's gravity manipulation technology has made something possible that we never imagined before. Show them what we've been working on. Rum's musical voice resonated with harmonics that expressed both pride and apprehension. 3 months ago, human engineers approached our collective with a request that our physicists initially declared impossible. They wanted to create artificial gravity wells of sufficient strength to affect the trajectories of entire fleets. The display shifted to show Jupiter and its extensive moon system. But there was something different about the gas giant's gravitational field. Massive installations on Ganymede and Europa were generating additional gravitational distortions that created a complex web of force fields extending throughout the Jovian system. By combining Kethmoran gravity generators with human fusion reactors and Alterian precision control systems, we've turned Jupiter into the largest gravity weapon ever created, Chen explained. When the Zephyrian fleet enters the system, we can channel their approach through specific corridors by manipulating local spacetime. The alien commanders studied the data with expressions of awe and concern. What humanity was proposing violated several fundamental principles of space combat that have been considered immutable for centuries. This is either brilliant or suicidal, observed Captain Clara of the Nexury Resistance Fleet. Possibly both. Definitely both, Chen agreed cheerfully. But that's what makes it human. As the hours passed, the combined fleet took up positions throughout the Sol system according to the battle plan. Human ships were dispersed among the asteroid belt, using the debris field as cover while their alliance partners positioned themselves at key gravitational transition points where they could maximize the effectiveness of their unique technologies. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, who had arrived from the Galactic Council just hours before the expected battle, stood beside Chun on the bridge of the Indomitable. Her diplomatic experience had proven invaluable in coordinating the Alliance response, but now she was about to witness the largest space battle in galactic history. "Admiral," she said quietly, "there's something you should know. The Galactic Council has been monitoring our communications with the other rebelling species. The entire galaxy is watching what happens here." "Good," Chen replied. "Let them see what happens when free species fight together." At that moment, the first Zephyrian ships began emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The enemy formation was a work of art, geometrically perfect and tactically flawless. 300 bioships arranged in interlocking patterns that provided mutual support while maximizing their offensive capabilities. Fleet Mind Zelker himself commanded the assault force, his consciousness distributed among the lead vessels in a way that allowed him to coordinate the entire fleet with ruthless efficiency. When he detected the scattered human and allied forces, his response was transmitted across all frequencies. "Humans of Earth, your resistance ends today. You have corrupted the natural order of the galaxy, inspired chaos among species that had found peace through unity with the collective. For this crime, your entire system will be sterilized and your planet rendered uninhabitable for 1,000 years." Chen's response was broadcast not just to the Zephyrian fleet, but to every monitoring station across the galaxy. "Fleet Mind Zelker, you're making the same mistake every tyrant in human history has made. You assume that people will choose safety over freedom. But here's what we've learned. Freedom isn't just worth fighting for, it's worth dying for. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of the traditional exchange of long-range fire between opposing formations, the Battle of Seoul became a complex, three-dimensional chess game, played across an entire star system. The first phase began when the Zephyrian fleet entered the outer system and encountered humanity's initial surprise. The entire asteroid belt had been turned into a weapon. Millions of small rocks, each equipped with simple guidance systems and fusion charges, began accelerating toward the enemy formation. Individually, they were insignificant. Collectively, they forced the Zephyrian ships to constantly maneuver to avoid impacts. Clever, Zelker admitted on the communication channels. You use quantity to compensate for technological inferiority, but these primitive weapons cannot penetrate our bioarmor. They're not meant to, Chin replied. They're meant to herd you toward Jupiter. The Zephyrian commander realized the trap too late. His fleet's evasive maneuvers were pushing them directly into the gravitational anomaly field that humanity and their allies had created around Jupiter. When the first ships crossed the threshold, they found themselves caught in artificial gravity wells that pulled them off course and separated them from their supporting vessels. Now, Chin commanded. Throughout the Jovian system, hidden human and allied ships emerged from concealment. They had been waiting in the shadows of moons and hiding behind asteroids, using the complex gravitational fields to mask their heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions. Each group targeted isolated Zephyrian vessels that had been separated from the main formation by the gravity traps. The quantum disruptors had been improved since the Battle of Proxima. Alliance technologies had made them more efficient, more powerful, and, most importantly, easier to manufacture. Every human ship now carried at least 2 of the deadly weapons, and many of the Allied vessels have been retrofitted with their own versions. The first coordinated strike destroyed 18 Zephyrian ships in less than 30 seconds. The aliens' perfect formation dissolved into chaos as individual commanders tried to escape the gravity traps while maintaining defensive positions. But the Alliance forces were just getting started. Phase 2, Chin ordered. Activate the solar collectors. For months, human and Alterian engineers have been secretly installing massive solar collection arrays in orbit around the sun. The arrays had appeared to be routine energy-gathering installations, but they were actually components of the largest directed energy weapon ever constructed. When activated, the solar collectors focused stellar energy into coherent beams that struck the Zephyrian fleet with the power of a small star. The bio ship's organic armor, evolved to withstand conventional weapons, proved vulnerable to energy levels that mimicked stellar radiation. Impossible, Zelker transmitted, his mental patterns showing confusion for the first time in centuries. Your species lacks the technology for stellar engineering. Our species, Harper interjected from the bridge of the Indomitable, includes 43 different technologies working together. That's something your collective can't understand, because you've never allowed true cooperation, only absorption. The battle raged for 6 hours, but it was unlike any previous engagement. Instead of grand formations clashing in open space, it became a system-wide campaign of ambushes, traps, and coordinated strikes by mixed species teams that used each other's strengths to overcome individual weaknesses. Human ships provided aggressive tactics and innovative strategies. Alterian vessels contributed superior sensors and precision targeting. Thraxian forces offered computational power that allowed real-time coordination across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Keth-Moran ships manipulated gravity to create tactical advantages that shifted moment by moment. Most importantly, the Alliance forces demonstrated something the galaxy had never seen: true cooperation between species with completely different military doctrines and technologies. They didn't just fight alongside each other. They fought as a unified force that was greater than the sum of its parts. The turning point came when a joint strike force led by Commander Elena Vasquez managed to penetrate the Zephyrian fleet's inner defenses and reach Zelker's command ship. The assault team consisted of human marines, Alterian technicians, and Thraxian computational specialists working together to accomplish something impossible: board and capture an enemy flagship. The boarding action that followed would become legendary. Human soldiers, trained in close-quarters combat, carved their way through the bioship's organic corridors while Alterian specialists disrupted the vessel's neural networks and Thraxian units processed tactical data faster than the defending Zephyrians could respond. When they reached the command center, they found fleet-mind Zelker himself, his consciousness partially distributed among the ship's bioneural networks. For the first time in galactic history, the Zephyrian commander was captured alive. "Your resistance is admirable," Zelker said, his patterns showing resignation. "But meaningless. The collective spans thousands of worlds. Even if you defeat this fleet, others will come." Vasquez, her armor scorched from the fighting, stepped forward. "That's where you're wrong. This isn't just about defeating your fleet. This is about proving that free species can work together. Every world under Zephyrian control is watching this battle. They're seeing that the collective can be beaten." She gestured to her mixed species team. "Look around you. Humans, Altarians, Thraxians, Kethmarans, all fighting together, using our differences as strengths instead of weaknesses. That's something your collective can never achieve, because it requires voluntary cooperation instead of forced unity." As if to prove her point, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Battle of Sol had been broadcast in real time to monitoring stations on hundreds of worlds. On planet after planet, subjugated species were rising in rebellion, inspired by the sight of the mighty Zephyrian fleet being systematically destroyed by a coalition of free peoples. The neural networks that maintained Zephyrian control began failing as local populations overwhelmed their overseers. Communication hubs went silent as resistance fighters destroyed the installations that allowed the collective to coordinate their vast empire. Most significantly, individual Zephyrians began breaking away from the collective consciousness, choosing to think for themselves rather than remain part of the hive mind. When the last Zephyrian ship in the Sol system was destroyed, the victory belonged not just to humanity or even to the Liberation Alliance. It belonged to every species in the galaxy that had chosen freedom over the false peace of surrender. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking out at the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Around her, representatives from dozens of species worked together to coordinate relief efforts for damaged ships and plan the next phase of their campaign. "Admiral," Dr. Harper said, joining her at the viewport, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire is collapsing. Without their central fleet and, with Zelker captured, the individual collective nodes are losing coherence." Chin nodded, but her expression remained serious. "The easy part is over. Now we have to figure out how to build a galaxy where dozens of different species can coexist without anyone trying to conquer everyone else. Think we can manage it?" Chun smiled, watching as human and alien crews worked together to clear the battlefield. "Elizabeth, 6 months ago, nobody thought different species could coordinate a military campaign. Now look at us. If we can learn to fight together, maybe we can learn to build together too." The age of the Zephyrian collective was ending, but the age of galactic cooperation was just beginning. And for the first time in a millennium, the future belonged to those brave enough to choose freedom over fear, diversity over uniformity, and hope over despair. The cosmos had indeed begun to shake, but what emerged from that shaking was something unprecedented, a galaxy where every species had the chance to determine its own destiny. 3 years after the fall of the Zephyrian collective, the galaxy was barely recognizable. What had once been a rigid hierarchy dominated by a single expansionist empire had transformed into a chaotic but vibrant community of independent species, all learning to navigate the complexities of true freedom. Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of Liberation Station, the massive space facility that served as the headquarters for the ongoing galactic reconstruction effort. Built in the ruins of a former Zephyrian control hub, the station was a symbol of everything the galaxy had achieved since humanity chose war 3 years ago. The corridors themselves told the story of interspecies cooperation. Human engineering provided the basic structure, but Altarian crystal technology created walls that shifted color to indicate different sections. Thraxian bioneural networks managed environmental controls that automatically adjusted atmosphere composition for different species. Kethmoran gravity systems allowed beings with incompatible physiologies to work in the same spaces. Vasquez's destination was the Central Command Center, where representatives from 87 different species were attempting to coordinate relief efforts for the former Zephyrian worlds. It was frustrating, inefficient, and often descended into heated arguments between beings who had completely different concepts of logic, morality, and basic decision-making. It was also the most hopeful thing Vasquez had ever witnessed. "Captain," called out Dr. Yuki Tanaka as Vasquez entered the command center, "we've got a situation developing in the Kepler 442 system. The former Zephyrian subjects there are requesting immediate assistance." Tanaka had become one of the galaxy's leading experts on post-collective rehabilitation. Her work with former Zephyrian subjects had revealed the true scope of what the Empire had done to the species it conquered. The neural integration process hadn't just suppressed individual consciousness. It had fundamentally altered how entire populations thought, remembered, and related to each other. "What kind of assistance?" Vasquez asked, settling into her command chair, which automatically adjusted to human physiology while providing translation interfaces for the dozen alien languages being spoken simultaneously around the center. "Complete societal reconstruction. The Calarians have been free from Zephyrian control for 6 months now, but they're having trouble functioning as independent individuals. Their entire social structure was based on collective decision-making imposed by the neural networks. It was a problem that had emerged on dozens of worlds. Species that had been absorbed into the collective generations ago had lost the cultural knowledge of how to govern themselves, how to make individual choices, even how to form personal relationships outside of the imposed neural links." "Recommended response?" Vasquez asked. "I think we need to send a full cultural reconstruction team. Humans to help with political organization, Altarians for technological transition, maybe some Vortani for social structure consulting." The irony wasn't lost on Vasquez that humanity, the most recent addition to galactic civilization, was now teaching other species how to organize free societies. But humans had thousands of years of experience with different forms of government, from tribalism to democracy to everything in between. Most galactic species had evolved more linear governmental structures that the Zephyrians had found easy to co-opt. "Approved. But, Elena, make sure the team understands they're consultants, not administrators. The Calarians need to figure out their own path forward." It was a principle that the Liberation Alliance had learned through painful trial and error. In the first months after the Collective's fall, well-meaning species had tried to impose their own governmental and social structures on liberated worlds. The results had been disastrous, often leading to civil wars between factions that wanted to adopt different alien models of civilization. Humanity's contribution to the solution had been characteristically unconventional. Instead of providing a single model to copy, they offered dozens of different approaches that species could adapt to their own needs. Parliamentary democracy, federal republics, tribal councils, city-states, even forms of limited monarchy. Humans had tried them all at various points in their history. "Speaking of cultural reconstruction," Tanaka continued, "we've received an interesting request from Zelker." Vasquez's expression hardened slightly. The former fleet mind of the Zephyrian Collective had been in Alliance custody since his capture during the Battle of Sol. Initially, there had been calls for his execution as a war criminal, but human legal experts had argued for a different approach. What does he want now? He wants to testify at the Truth and Reconciliation proceedings on Zephyr Prime. He says he has information about collective operations that could help with the rehabilitation efforts. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was another human innovation that had been adapted for galactic use. Instead of simply punishing former collective leaders, the Commission focused on uncovering the truth about what had happened during the centuries of Zephyrian rule and finding ways to heal the psychological damage that had been done to entire civilizations. Is this genuine cooperation or another manipulation attempt? Hard to say, but the psychiatric evaluation team thinks he's undergone genuine psychological changes since being separated from the collective consciousness. Apparently, individual self-awareness is traumatic for a being who spent centuries as part of a hive mind. Vasquez considered this for a moment. Zelker's case had become a test of the Alliance's commitment to justice versus vengeance. Keeping him alive and isolated from collective influence was partly pragmatic. His knowledge of Zephyrian operations was invaluable for reconstruction efforts. But it was also ideological, a demonstration that the new galactic order would be based on rehabilitation rather than retribution. Set up the testimony, but with full security protocols. If this is a trap, I want us ready for it. Understood. There's one more thing, Elena. We've been getting reports from the frontier regions about something unusual. The frontier regions were areas of space that had been under Zephyrian control, but were now beyond the reach of Alliance reconstruction efforts. Officially, These areas were considered liberated but unaffiliated. Unofficially, they were lawless regions where former collective subjects, criminal organizations, and opportunistic species competed for resources and territory. Define unusual. Several independent sources report the emergence of new technological developments that don't match any known galactic civilization. Someone is building ships and weapons that combine technologies from multiple species in ways we haven't seen before. Vasquez felt a familiar chill. One of the unintended consequences of the collective's fall had been the dispersal of captured technologies across the galaxy. Former Zephyrian facilities had contained research and development from hundreds of conquered species, representing millennia of scientific advancement. Pirates with stolen tech. That's what we thought initially. But the reports describe technological integration that requires deep understanding of multiple scientific disciplines. This isn't just stolen equipment. Someone is actively developing new hybrid technologies. Before Vasquez could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The main display lit up with an incoming priority transmission marked with the highest security classification. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Shun from the communication station, "we're receiving an emergency signal from Admiral Harper aboard the UES Constitution. They're requesting immediate assistance." Admiral Elizabeth Harper had been promoted following her diplomatic success during the formation of the Liberation Alliance. Her current mission was leading the deep space exploration fleet that was mapping former Zephyrian territories and making first contact with species that had been isolated for centuries. "Put her through." Harper's face appeared on the main screen, but the background suggested she was calling from the bridge of her flagship during a crisis situation. Sparks flew from damaged consoles while crew members worked frantically at emergency repair stations. "Elena, we've encountered something unprecedented out here. We're in the Vegas sector, investigating reports of unusual energy signatures. What we found, I'm not sure how to explain it. Try. We've discovered a species that didn't exist 3 years ago. They call themselves the Synthesis, and they appear to be former subjects from multiple Zephyrian-conquered civilizations who have voluntarily merged their technologies and biological characteristics." The implications hit Vasquez immediately. While most liberated species had struggled to rebuild their individual identities, some might have chosen a different path: voluntary integration with other species to create entirely new forms of civilization. Are they hostile? Unknown. They agreed to this communication, but their representatives are difficult to understand. They seem to think and communicate in ways that don't translate well to individual consciousness. The display split to show a second image, beings that appeared to be a fusion of different species characteristics. Some had the crystalline features of Altarians combined with the bioluminescent skin of Aquarians. Others showed Thraxian hive mind integration patterns merged with Vortani feather structures. It was as if evolution had been compressed and directed by conscious choice rather than natural selection. One of the Synthesis representatives spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords operating in coordination. "We greet the alliance of separated beings. We represent the voluntary collective, those who chose integration over isolation, synthesis over division. Are you aligned with the former Zephyrian collective?" Vasquez asked directly. "We are what the Zephyrians could have become if they had chosen cooperation over domination. We integrate willingly, maintain individuality within unity, and seek to grow rather than conquer." It was a fascinating distinction that immediately split the Alliance leadership into different factions. Some saw the Synthesis as a natural evolution of interspecies cooperation. Others viewed them as a potential threat that could rebuild the oppressive aspects of the old collective under a new name. "What do you want?" Harper asked from her ship. "To offer an alternative. Your alliance seeks to maintain separation while encouraging cooperation. We demonstrate that true unity is possible without the loss of individual choice. Some may find our path more appealing than the chaos of independence." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. In the 3 years since the fall of the Zephyrian Collective, the Alliance had focused on helping species rebuild their independence. Now, they were confronted with the possibility that some species might voluntarily choose a different form of unity. "Elena," Tanaka said quietly, "this could fundamentally change everything we've been working toward." Vasquez nodded, studying the data from Harper's encounter. The synthesis represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective consciousness that claimed to preserve individual choice while achieving true unity between different species. Give me a direct line to Earth Command, and start preparing analysis teams for long-term observation of this synthesis group. We need to understand what they really are before we decide how to respond. As she spoke, reports began flowing in from across the galaxy. Word of the synthesis had spread quickly through the various communication networks, and the response was immediate and intense. Some species expressed interest in learning more about voluntary integration. Others demanded that the Alliance take military action to prevent the emergence of a new collective. But, perhaps most significantly, several former Zephyrian subjects, species that had struggled with independence, began requesting permission to make contact with the synthesis to explore their alternative approach to post-collective existence. Captain, reported the senior analyst, we're getting communication requests from 17 different species asking about the possibility of voluntary integration programs. They